All right, friends, Wednesday Bible Reflection Time, special Thanksgiving edition. I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Reverend Nancy Watson. Nancy, thank you for being with us.
I'm glad to be here, especially during this time of year.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk here some about just gratitude, thankfulness. I was remembering when I went to div school, I actually hadn't thought about many things. And I was taking Hebrew, and we learned the Hebrew word for thanks. And it's interesting, my Hebrew professor said, there's not really a Hebrew word for thanks. I thought, well, there's got to be. Thanks is in the Bible all the time. He pointed out the Hebrew word is todah, and todah is not like thanks, like words that you say. A todah is an offering. You take something that's precious to you, your best sheep, the first grain that comes in, and you offer it to God as a todah, as a thanksgiving. That was really interesting to me that in the Bible, thanksgiving is always something tangible. It's something precious to me that I offer to God. Although saying thank you is not a bad thing. I remember with all my children insisting they write thank you notes. I remember my son Noah saying, my generation doesn't do thank you notes. I said, my generation does, and you're going to do thank you notes. Hopefully he's gotten the hang of that. Expressing thanks is really important. I've shared this with y'all many times. I still think it's important. The psychiatrist named Martin Seligman wrote a cool book called Flourish. It's not about religion at all, but he talks in there about anxiety and depression. And it's not that this cures anxiety or depression, but he says that if you do tangible things expressing gratitude, so, write thank you notes, make a list by hand of what went well today. He said, when you do this, your anxiety scores go down by a significant percentage. Your depression scores go down by a significant percentage. I'm really struck by that. Thanksgiving is a holiday. It's going to be weird this year because we're talking about distancing, traveling, there's all these pandemic concerns. Thanksgiving is a holiday. I remember as a kid, it kind of puzzled me. It was fun. Family would get together and we'd gorge on way too much food and watch football games, fall asleep in the afternoon. And I started wondering, where's the gratitude in that? Am I grateful we got this much food and can gorge ourselves? I read a thing, Reinhold Niebuhr, great theologian of the last century. In 1927, they had a community Thanksgiving service in Detroit, and he was the speaker. He kind of raised that same question, like, what kind of gratitude is this? The way we practice Thanksgiving? And then his famous quote is he said, Thanksgiving in America is the business of congratulating the Almighty upon his most excellent co-workers, ourselves. I love that. He's kind of thinking that Thanksgiving is kind of a time for us to bask in kind of how we got it made. And maybe you feel sorry for somebody that doesn't have it made, so you want to send a meal to somebody at Thanksgiving. That's really interesting. So Thanksgiving, what does it mean this Thanksgiving to be thankful? I've been trying to work on this thing a lot of times around prayer. People will say, I pray for. What do you pray for? I pray for something or another. But I want to get away from just you pray for something. Maybe just pray. Maybe you just have time with God. Same thing with thankful. We tend to think thankful. I'm thankful for, and we fill in the list. I just want to be, thankful as a person. Nancy, talk to us some about thankfulness and gratitude from your perspective.
I really appreciated your suggestions about thinking about thankfulness as not being connected to stuff. We're thankful for things. We're thankful we got a bonus. We're thankful we have a roof over our head. And as you said so many times, it's tied into what we think we did for ourselves, that we've worked hard and we've earned this and we're thankful to us. And sometimes we forget to we throw in thankful to God as almost an afterthought. So in trying to find
and I'll interrupt. It's related to that word blessing, which I sometimes I wish people wouldn't use. People say, whatever, like, I'm blessed with a great job. Well, what about the person that lost their job? I'm blessed with 3 children. What about the people that couldn't have children? Right? So as if God zooms in on some people. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That was a really good point. And I think the same way about that phrase that we often use. It's, but if it, but for the grace of God, it would be me. Well, what about those people that, does that mean they don't have God's grace because they're in a more difficult position than we are? So we tend to get all these feelings about thankfulness and grace and blessing and whatever tied up with stuff. And most of the time it's stuff that we've played a role in obtaining for ourselves. So I started to think about it a little differently, and I was guided by how we often regard the difference between happiness and joy. And we know that happiness is different from joy. Happiness is dependent upon the circumstances, whether things are going well or whether we feel success and so forth. But joy is deeper. I had a real good friend, Evelyn Laycock, and she used to say, joy lives in the marrow of your bones, which means to me that joy is actually a part of your Christian character. It's a part of who you are at your core. Joy is second nature to you. And of course, we all know people who, for reasons sometimes we can't even fathom, they are joyful, even in the midst of horrible circumstances and challenges and chaos. And so I took that same perspective and tried to think about gratitude in the same way, and the difference between being thankful and having gratitude. And as we mentioned, thankfulness is so tied to stuff. We're thankful that we got our bills paid this month. We're thankful we have a roof over our heads. But gratitude runs deeper. And it's not dependent upon present circumstances, and it's not dependent on feelings, and it's not dependent on stuff. And so I really think that that's what Paul was getting at when he told us in 1 Thessalonians 5 to give thanks in all situations, not for all things, but in all things to be thankful. I think he was really talking about gratitude. And gratitude, like joy, is a component of the Christian character, and it should live in the marrow of your bones. It should be second nature to you. And in thinking about Christian character, as opposed to feelings, character has to be developed. Feelings just happen, and in and of themselves, they're neither good nor bad. They just are. But character is formed intentionally by 1,001 different choices that we make every day, decisions to do one thing and not to do something else. And these are choices of things like self-control, choices to be intentionally thankful, to be generous, to be content, not to dwell on jealousy or envy, or if you want to go the 10 Commandments route, the choice not to covet what somebody else may have. And Paul talks about being transformed by the renewal of our minds, by taking on a new way of thinking about things, about seeing things, about interpreting things. And these are conscious decisions that we make to see things differently, to see things from a different perspective. I saw a meme just this morning about that, some people could be given a field of roses and they'll only see the thorns in it. And other people, you can give them a single weed and all they will see is the wildflower in it. And the difference between those two vantage points is the idea of perspective and perception. And it's all about perception.
And I love the way you're talking about that, to get away from just, is it a feeling? Do I feel grateful? Do I feel joyful? I mean, it becomes a feeling, but it's really a matter of discipline and practice over time and making choices. Some people always envy them. Some people, they just have a sunny disposition and they're just cheerful and they just seem naturally grateful. Maybe they were raised at home where they do the right thank you notes. They're just kind of grateful people. And other people, they're a little grouchy. They battle depression. There's a lot of darkness. But everybody can learn this practice of gratitude, whether it's from writing notes or just Henry Nouwen in his great book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, says 1,000 times a day you have a choice. Can I be resentful or can I be grateful? Can I be guilty? Can I be grateful? Can I be anxious? Can I be grateful? I've shared with people before in my unscientific study of me, I find it impossible for me to be anxious and grateful at the same time. Mm-hmm. I get anxious easily. Darkness can really dog me. But I find when I'm being grateful, when I'm writing a note to somebody, when I'm saying, thank you so much, I really appreciate you. When I do that, I don't know, I don't feel anxious in that moment. And I'm somebody given to anxiety. So that's a hopeful thing, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and it's a conscious choice that you're making to look for things for which to be grateful. Repetitive complaining will only draw us to think other things to complain about. If we're constantly complaining, boy, it's easy to see more and one more thing.
And the news media just feeds the
Hammer.
negativity. I hate to just trash the media; that's too easy. But it just says your MO should be resentment, rage, anger, mistrust. So we're kind of fed that all the time. Before you mentioned Evelyn Laycock, by the way, what a great teacher. I had to follow her on a program one time. I'm like, ooh, that was.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the thing in Paul I think about is in Philippians chapter 4, where I love it. Paul says, with gratitude, make your requests made known to God. Like I think I always thought I make my requests made known to God. And if God does what I ask God, maybe I remember to say thank you to God. But Paul says, with gratitude, make your requests. So like you start always in gratitude, and that changes the whole posture of prayer, I think, right out of the chute.
It makes a huge difference, because just like repetitive complaining will draw your attention to more stuff to complain about, repetitive gratitude will draw your attention to finding things to be thankful about and will reinforce your attitude of gratitude. And that, like what you mentioned before, that is a conscious choice. It's a conscious decision to look for things and look for reasons to be grateful. So as you mentioned, being grateful actually improves your outlook on life. Developing gratitude as a part of your inner nature of who you are actually helps shift us all from this prevalent attitude of cynicism and pessimism, which is so prevalent today. But gratitude shifts us more toward the truth of God's presence and his goodwill for us all. It reminds us that God only wants good for us. God doesn't sit up there with a smite button on his computer, trying to figure out who to smite. He really has the best interests of all of us at the heart of his being. So when we make choices about how to see, how to react, how to interpret what's going on over a long period of time, our perspective changes, and gratitude then becomes part of our nature, becomes part of who we are. So it's not just a feeling, it's a part of who you are. And the interesting thing is that when that happens, this sense of thanksgiving kicks in almost automatically. So if perception is a key component of gratitude, gratitude then becomes a key component of joy. That sense that lives in the marrow of your bones and is who you are.
It's related, I think, to contentment. So again, it's not the news media, it's the advertising media that says you should not be content. You should want more. But there's something about gratitude that is content. I also want to think about, we've been thinking kind of about being grateful or expressing gratitude to other people. I want to think about expressing gratitude to God. And maybe it's not just for the things that I think God has given me. Can I be grateful just for God being? Can I be grateful for what God has done? God created the world. God sent his son, Jesus, God, right? So prayer, we tend to, I pray for something, but I bet God just wants us to delight in God and to think, thank God, thank you that you came in the person of your son, Jesus. And we're going to look at his birth next month, and then his life and his teachings. Thank you. That just is, and that's something that everybody can give thanks for, right?
Absolutely. And I think this idea that, we can give thanks for taking good delight in God, but I also think we can be deeply, deeply grateful that God takes delight in us. We are the apple of his eye. He takes great delight in us. Thank goodness he doesn't leave us where he finds us, but he does take great delight in who we are, because we are created in his image, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think some about, so this is weird. I try to think of, like odd things to be grateful for. And sometimes the worst things, if I can think about it, there's so much gratitude in it. So sometimes you lose someone that you love,
Mhm.
and there's agony and pain and tears. And I always want to find out, like, isn't there a way to be grateful for that? Like, think how sad it would be to lose someone. Like, yeah, he's gone. Like, the cockroach got stepped on. He's done, right? But you shed tears and you feel pain over a long period of time. Before we're done, I want to read from people smarter than I am about gratitude. So this is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a great theologian, was killed by the Nazis. He was in a prison camp, and on Christmas Eve of 1943, he wrote a letter. It says that he's separated from his family at Christmas. He's distraught. Here's what he wrote. This just means so much to me. Nothing can make up for the absence of someone whom we love. So that sounds hard, but at the same time, it is a great consolation for the gap. There's a gap. The gap, as long as it remains unfilled, preserves the bonds between us. It's nonsense to say God fills the gap. Like, I've heard this kind of thing forever, right? Like, you feel this hollowness or the loss of someone, God will fill that and it will feel better. Bonhoeffer's saying, like, you want to fill the gap. It's nonsense to say God fills the gap. He doesn't fill it, but on the contrary, God keeps it empty. And so helps us to keep alive our former communion with each other, even at the cost of pain. The dearer and richer our memories, the more difficult the separation. But gratitude changes the pangs of memory into tranquil joy. The beauties of the past are born not as a thorn in the flesh, but as a precious gift. I just loved that. I remember a dad telling me one time he'd lost his son. His son was 23 and had died. And he said, people keep wanting me to feel better. He said, I don't want to feel better. Like, he was worth loving. He's worth hurting over. I treasure every minute. That was really interesting to me. He was grateful for the pain, oddly.
I think so, James, and I think your point is very, very well made. And I think if you can take that off into a slightly different direction with regard to gratitude, gratitude is never meant to be passive. It's not just about me sitting back and feeling grateful for all the stuff that I have, or all the stuff that I am, or the way that God has smiled on me. From a Christian perspective, if I am grateful, I have found contentment, and then that makes it incumbent upon me to make sure that others can find contentment, that others have cause to be grateful. So in this instance, my sense of gratitude doesn't focus on a lack in my life. It focuses on a lack in the lives of people around me who may not be, as we would phrase it, as fortunate as I am. So in my sense of gratitude, I can be keenly aware of the gaps in other people's lives, and it becomes incumbent upon me then to do something about it, which leads me to this other aspect of gratitude. Gratitude and generosity go hand in hand. And I really think that true generosity, the kind that's no strings attached, I don't expect anything in return, freely given, that kind of generosity really can only come from someone for whom gratitude is a part of who they are. It's a part of their character. And so gratefulness is not what those people feel, it's something that they are. And so generosity is a natural outflow from that. And of course, the season of Thanksgiving, we're going to spend a lot of time tomorrow talking about all the things that we're thankful for. But perhaps one of the things that we can be thankful for is that it makes us more generous people.
And so let's think a little bit about gratitude and memory.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime we talk about gratitude, Thanksgiving, it's kind of a looking back to something. When I think about memory, I shared around All Saints Day that in my father's dying days, he couldn't be visited because of COVID, and he wasn't good at an iPad or phone or anything. And I found this stash of old photos from his childhood and his teenage years and when he was in the military, and I just would print out on big paper photo every day and send it to him. So it was like I took him on a daily journey down memory lane, and it brought him so much joy. So that reminds. Here's the thing. So this is from Frederick Buechner, a great writer. And this is kind of long, but stay with me on this. I think this is beautiful. Buechner says, in one sense, the past is dead and gone, but in another sense, it's not done with at all, or at least not done with us. Every person we have ever known, every place we have ever seen, everything that has ever happened to us, it all lives and breathes deep in us somewhere. A scrap of a song, a book we read as a child, a stretch of road we used to travel, an old photograph. Suddenly, there it is. Old failures, old hurts, times too beautiful to tell. We are all such escape artists. We are apt to talk about almost anything under the sun except what really matters, except for what's going on inside our own skin. We chatter. We hold each other at bay. It is the same when we are alone. We turn on the television or find some chore that could easily wait. We cling to the present out of wariness of the past. We cling to the surface out of fear of what lies beneath the surface. We get tired. But there is a deeper need to enter into that still room within us all where the past lives on as the present, where the dead are alive again, where we are most alive to ourselves, to the long journeys of our lives. So much has happened. Remembering means a deeper, slow kind of remembering, searching and finding. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen, goes the old spiritual, but we know it. We are to remember it. And the happiness we have seen too. Precious times, precious people, moments when we were better than we knew how to be. And then we will find beyond any feelings of joy or regret a profound and undergirding peace, a sense that in some unfathomable way all is well. We have survived. There were times we never thought we would and nearly didn't. Many times I've chosen the wrong road or the right road for the wrong reason. Many times I've loved people too much for their good or mine. And others I might have loved, I missed loving and lost. There were the times I might have given up, but I didn't. Weak as we are, a strength beyond our strength has pulled us through at least this far. A love beyond our power to love has kept our hearts alive. We are never really alone. I just pull that out and read that once in a while because it just strikes to the core of that's life. That's God and your life. How does that strike you, Nancy?
It's beautiful and it's profound. And I think if we take those thoughts of Buechner and view them through a lens of gratitude, when we remember what's in our past, the good, bad, and everything in between, if gratitude is part of who we are, gratitude helps bring those memories, all of them, from the past into our present in such a way that it then shapes our future. So gratitude helps us view all those memories and all those experiences that we've had in such a way that we can positively shape our future or view our future or have a perspective about the future. It's what enables us to have hope about the future. The fact that, all those things happened, we're still here, and we have hope for the future. And gratitude has a huge role to play in our formation of hope.
Yeah, I mean, without a lot of theologians have said this kind of thing, like, hope, it's got a foot in the past and a foot in the future. You need the assurance from the past to make you look forward. I love that the Buechner thing referred to that all will be well, which is a phrase we've been using. We didn't prepare this way, but I want to ask you this. Buechner talks about kind of memory from back in the day. I want you to think back just a few years for you to your childhood, just a few years.
Yeah, one or two.
A couple more than me. And think back to your childhood and just what comes to your mind that creates a sense of gratitude and joy in you?
I was very fortunate to be part of a family where I knew that I was loved and I knew that I was wanted. And so that those memories of being part of a family that, I knew I belonged. And if you want to look at specific Thanksgiving memories, Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house with, a bazillion aunts and uncles and cousins and something bigger than I am, to be a part of that. And to actually, to have, Aunt Elsie come up to me or have some cousin that I hadn't seen in years come up to me and look at me and look at me and look at me and go, you must be Perry's girl because you look a lot like him. They see things in me I didn't see in myself, but because of what they saw, they knew I belonged where I was. And I was part of something bigger than myself and part of a family. And that has sustained me in so many ways over the years.
Um, it's never any one thing, and it's certainly not what did I get for Christmas in 1965? I have no idea. What did I get for Christmas last year? I don't know. But times that I've been loved, that I've been included. I've talked a lot about going to my grandparents' home, and that's a lot of those old photos that I sent my dad were from their home, were of them. And just looking at them, it can kind of be sappy nostalgia, but also it reminds me that at some point in time, I wasn't Dr. James Howell, the senior pastor. I was just a kid, James, still am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those people, they loved me unconditionally. It wouldn't matter how it turned out. I could have gone to college or not. I could have gotten married or not. I could have succeeded or not. It didn't matter. You're in the family. I'm a Howell. This is the Howell here. I've got it. It's here. And this changes a lot of things. So I've got a couple of cousins, and we could not disagree more strongly on politics and what matters in the world, all this stuff. Yeah, Matt, we love each other. We're always going to love each other. We call each other. We support each other. We attend our funerals together. We celebrate birth. Yeah. So that see, there's something to be grateful for. We tend to think it's like the Niebuhr thinks, our self-congratulation. Oh, look how well I've done. Mm-hmm. Nobody can do well enough to replace what you and I have just been talking about, is that you belong.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with developing that larger perspective, though, so that you can see that and so you can embrace that and so you can appreciate that.
There's some. So I like to tie things together that people don't talk about very much. So wisdom is of great interest to me. I had the great good fortune when I was in graduate school to study with Roland Murphy. He was a Catholic priest. He was our country's leading scholar of wisdom. And by that, the wisdom books of the Bible, so Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, all of that. But he didn't just know about wisdom, he was wise. Mm-hmm. And I talk about wisdom, and wisdom has to be, we know smart people, but who are the wise people? That's hard to think about. If wisdom is a thing, right, it's got to be rooted primarily, I think, in gratitude. Mm-hmm. Don't you think? Why does gratitude produce wisdom?
That old adage about knowledge is just data, but wisdom is knowing what to do with it. And so knowing what to do with your smarts, knowing what to do with the things that you know, if gratitude and joy and peace and all those other components of a Christian character, if all of those are there, it really shapes how you make decisions on what to do with what you know, what to do with what you have. And so the real wisdom, comes out of that Christian character. In fact, if you look in Proverbs and even to some degree in the Psalms, wisdom is a character. Wisdom is personified. And so, and I would think that part of that persona would be aspects of gratitude, aspects of joy. aspects of peace, all those things that are not contingent on present circumstances or present feelings, but are part of one's character, is part of who you are. It's second nature to who you are.
And it's cultivated over time, and it takes some time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like if you get older, you're going to be wiser. I know some old people that they could not be less wise,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I know some young people who are very wise indeed. So somehow wisdom, gratitude, all the stuff, it's got to be a matter. So it's a matter of discipline. It also takes time. It takes, I think, shutting off the gadgets and being still. I've told before about the guy in my first church he was just wonderful. I loved him dearly, and I really admired him. And he just was a wise person. And I've told this before, but I want to tell it again. It just makes me happy to tell it. I went to him one time and I said, "You are so wise." And he said, No. That's all. The wise do that, right? They never go, "Yes, I'm so wise." And so he had a humility about him. That was the thing. I said, like, what's your secret? Because this wasn't somebody who traveled all over the world, owned fine paintings, read complicated books, or any of that. And he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "I get up in the morning, do some chores. I go to work." He was a brick mason. He said, "I come home, have some more chores, help Peggy around the house. We eat dinner, I help clean up." He said, "Then, most nights I go down in the basement. I've got a wood stove down there, and I have a peach crate, and I just sit on that peach crate and think."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, I'm turning on the Dukes of Hazzard or something. So why are some people wise? And it can be as simple as like, I take some time just to be quiet and still and to think, because if you think, you don't get fooled by silly stuff. There's some contentment in that, right? If I can be still, I read one time that your adrenaline, there's some addiction in your adrenaline. So you get used to rushing around and the adrenaline feeds it. And this is why when you go on vacation, you go, "Man, I was tireder than I thought I was." It's because you're getting shut down over your adrenaline. That's why people do vacations like I do, which you rush around crazier than you do when you're at work. But to develop that habit of just being still will create gratitude. It will create wisdom. I think at the end of the day, that's where the joy is. It's not flitting from one fun thing to another. That's not going to give you joy. That can leave you hollowed out, right?
Mm-hmm. And and you're so right about that. I mean, where did we get the term being an adrenaline junkie? I mean, people who do extreme sports and crazy stuff, I wouldn't even think about doing. But this idea of being still, that's also part of a development of your character. It's one of those hundreds of daily intentional choices that you make that over a long period of time produce this development of character, this development of wisdom. And I really think that when we make the decision to be quiet and be still, what is it that it says? Be still and know that I am God. And
you aren't.
And you aren't. Exactly. That's what I get out of that, is that, that is so far above my pay grade to be in charge of everything and responsible for everything. And for me to sit and be still and let God be God, and then knowing and appreciating my own presence in God's scheme of things, that, I do have value, I do have worth, I do have purpose, I do have meaning. And that helps instill peace and a sense of well-being, but it also gives rise to things like gratitude. How wonderful is it that God allows us to do that, allows us to be that, allows us to know that we have a place and we have meaning and we have worth, and that I'm not a waste of space and I'm not an accident. And so all these other characteristics then bubble forth from that: gratitude, joy, peace, wisdom. But it's all down to being an intentional development of that. It's not like you just sit back and I've got the Spirit and I'm just going to wait for the fruits of the Spirit to show up. No, you have to cultivate the fruits of the Spirit. You have to cultivate your character. You have to be intentional about it. And it goes back to those 1,000 little choices every day. that add up, a cumulative effect.
And then the awareness of, again, the awareness of God. Everybody during the pandemic, everybody says, I'm so tired. I'm so weary. Actually, they were weary before the pandemic, as
Yeah.
it turns out. And one of the reasons that we're so weary is like we're like Atlas. We're trying to carry the world on our shoulders. And God just must laugh or weep or something like, I've got it. I'm God. You don't have to be God. Well, I read this thing years ago, Walter Brueggemann's commentary on Genesis. He talks about that God rested on the seventh day. So like if God could rest, like you can rest. And the way he phrased it is he said, God wants us in God's mercy to learn that not everything depends on me and my feverish activity. I love the way he puts that. Back last fall, we did a series that was called Enough. And someone was asking, how much is enough? It's probably not what we think. How much is enough? So when do we say enough? Like it's enough nonsense. We're going to take a stand against it. But the biggest part of it is how can I learn to say I am enough? Mm-hmm. Your memory from childhood, you remember the time that, oh, you were enough. I was enough. Mm-hmm. I still am enough. We all are enough. That's the gospel. That's the wisdom. That's really the thing to give thanks for this year in Thanksgiving. That I'm enough. You're enough.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And out of that different perspective, different way of seeing ourselves than how the world would have us see ourselves, certainly how advertising would have us see ourselves. But that different perspective, that different way of interpreting things is a really important component of gratitude.
Nancy, thank you for joining me for this today. I am grateful for you and for your friendship and for your ministry. I'm grateful to God that God brought you into our world, and you and I get to work together every day. It's just such a great joy. God really is good all the time, and you're a manifestation of that, and I'm so very grateful.
Well, thank you, and I too am very, very grateful to be where I am in ministry with this great group of folks.
We're grateful for people who have stayed to the bitter end of this conversation out there. Thank you, folks, for watching us. And you might want to share it with somebody if you thought it was worthwhile. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll be together starting next week to have some Advent themes that we'll be covering. I interview somebody cool about Mary. I've got a guy who wrote a book about Scrooge and Christmas and God. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be great fun. I might even do a little thing on Christmas carols, sit at the piano, do a session for you, which will be great fun. Anyway, folks, thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.